Welcome to this online worship service. I'm the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore, and I minister to this congregation with the Reverend Jennifer Brower and the Reverend Jay Brooks and our student minister, Aaliyah Shenborough. Although we continue to be physically distant to protect public health, we also continue to create loving religious community, encourage spiritual growth, and build a more just and joyful world. We seek to restore the balance of our spirits, to celebrate the joys of life, and to find strength to meet our sorrows. You may be new to Unitarian Universalism. Ours is a religious tradition which embraces the wisdom of all faiths and values diversity. We believe in using science, reason, and the gifts of the Spirit to explore life's meaning and mystery. We believe that you do not have to think alike to love alike. Please see our website for more information on Unitarian Universalism and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock. Our guest preacher for this service is Cassandra Montenegro. Cassie is a student at Harvard Divinity School. As an active UU leader and a queer cisgender Latina, Cassie seeks to create safe spaces where Unitarian Universalists explore their own theologies, experience wonder and transformation, and thrive in all aspects of our shared humanity, reclaiming and redefining what is sacred. Let us worship together.
Hola everyone, my name is Cassie Montenegro. I use she, ella pronouns, and I'm truly honored to be with you, good people of UU Shelter Rock, whenever, wherever you join us in worship. This service will be an exploration of sublime silences, of those found in those liminal spaces we call endings. Yet what is an ending anyway? And how can the sacred, solitary silence of one help guide us in the journey to come?
As We Travel in Unknown Lands by Barnaby Fetter. This chalice lighting is based on reading number 486 by Dag Hammarskjöld in Singing the Living Tradition. We kindle a flame we trust will lead us forward as we travel in unknown lands, where the question, shall I ever get there, resounds, a clear, pure note in every silence.
My old friend, I come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seed while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobbled stone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never shared, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools, said I, you do not know, silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you, take my arms that I might reach out to you, but my words like silent raindrops fell, echoed in wells of silence. And the people bowed in parade to the neon god they made, and the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, and whispered in the sounds of silence.
As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to affirm 7 principles, the second of which calls us to promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. One of the most direct ways we live into this value each week is by taking up collections for organizations which seek to reduce harm and offer help, hope, and healing to individuals, families, and communities in desperate need. This month, our collection is focused on 2 organizations. The first is the Aid Center of Queens County, an organization this congregation has a long-standing relationship with. ACQC serves over 10,000 HIV-positive clients and 30,000 community residents throughout the borough, offering a range of harm reduction services and addressing needs around medical care, housing, mental health, and more to enhance the quality of life for those living with and at risk for HIV/AIDS, hepatitis C, and other chronic conditions. And as some of us know all too intimately, since the start of this pandemic, food insecurity, which was already an all too present reality for far too many families, has worsened and increased at an astonishing rate across the country. As people face economic turmoil and food scarcity, in addition to the crises of health and crises of conscience brought about by this time of pandemic, I want to draw your attention to the second local organization the congregation's collection will be supporting this month. The North Shore Soup Kitchen's Nosh program was established at the start of this pandemic and works to safely deliver nutritionally balanced meals for families facing food insecurity. Each week, volunteers for the Nosh program deliver food to 360 families on the North Shore of Long Island. Please join us in supporting this good work to feed those who are hungering amidst the cold of winter, to aid those who are most vulnerable, and to ease the burden for those who are uncertain how they will survive this devastating time without additional support. There are 3 ways that you can donate: through our website at UUCSR.org, over text at 516-210-2528, or through PayPal. Please give as generously as you are able in this time of intensifying need. Thank you for your compassion and your generosity. May we continue to build a more just and joyful world together.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
So today's reading comes from one of Virginia Woolf's great texts. It's called To the Lighthouse. For those of you who haven't read it, or maybe like me, I up until this last fall, I hadn't read it in about 14 or 15 years. So I had kind of forgotten what was in it. But essentially, without giving you too many spoilers, there is this family. They're called the Ramsey, and this woman, Mrs. Ramsey, she is really at the epicenter of it. It's set in the early 19th century, and her husband, Mr. Ramsey, is this academic, and they take their kids to the seaside in England for the summers. So Mr. Ramsey can get some work done, and so Mrs. Ramsey can essentially entertain a bunch of academics and creatives, and one of those creative types is this woman, this young painter named Lily Briscoe. And the bit that we're gonna read together this morning is the very end. And it's many years have passed, and Lily has been able to travel back to the setting of that summer where she had started painting a portrait of Mrs. Ramsey. And Mr. Ramsey travels back, as do some of his children, and this one gentleman named Mr. Carmichael, who will make an appearance at this ending. And what I ask you to do as you listen is listen for the silence, not just in between the words, the lines themselves, but maybe listen to the silence at the end. "He must have reached it," said Lily Briscoe aloud, feeling suddenly completely tired out. For the lighthouse had become almost invisible, had melted away into a blue haze, and the effort of looking at it and the effort of thinking of him landing there, which had both seemed to be one and the same effort, had stretched over her body and mind to the utmost. But she was relieved. Whatever she had wanted to give him when he left her that morning, she had given him at last. "He has landed," she said aloud. "It is finished." Then, surging up, puffing slightly, old Mr. Carmichael stood beside her, looking like an old pagan god, shaggy, with weeds in his hair and the trident, it was only a French novel, in his hand. He stood by her on the edge of the lawn, swaying a little in his bulk, and said, shading his eyes with his hand, "They will have landed." And she felt that she had been right. They had not needed to speak. They had been thinking the same things, and he had answered her without her asking him anything. He stood there as if he were spreading his hands over all the weakness and suffering of mankind. She thought he was surveying tolerantly and compassionately their final destiny. Now he has crowned the occasion, she thought, with his hand slowly fell, as if she had seen him let fall from his great height a wreath of violets and asphodels, which, fluttering slowly, lay at length upon the earth. Quickly, as if she were recalled by something over there, she turned to her canvas. There it was, her picture. Yes, with all its greens and blues, its lines running up and across, its attempt at something. It would be hung in the attic, she thought. It would be destroyed. But what did that matter? She asked herself, taking up her brush again. She looked at the steps. They were empty. She looked at her canvas. It was blurred. With a sudden intensity, as if she saw it clear for a second, she drew a line there at its center. It was done. It was finished. Yes, she thought, laying down her brush in extreme fatigue. I have had my vision.
Excuse me, but can I be you for a while? My dog won't bite if you sit real still. I got the Antichrist in the kitchen yelling at me again. Yeah, I can hear that. Been saved again by the garbage truck. Got something to say, you know, but nothing comes. Yes, I know what you think of me. You never shut up. Yeah, I can hear that, but what if I'm a mermaid in these jeans of his with her name still on it? Hey, but I don't care, 'cause sometimes I said sometimes I hear my voice, and it's been here, silent all these years. So you found a girl who thinks really deep thoughts. What's so amazing about really deep thoughts? Boy, you best pray that I bleed real soon. How's that thought for ya? My scream got lost in a paper cup. You think there's a heaven where some screams have gone? I got $25 and a cracker. Do you think it's enough to get us there? 'Cause what if I'm a mermaid in these jeans of his with her name still on it? Hey, but I don't care, 'cause sometimes I said sometimes I hear my voice, and it's been here. sky is falling. Your mother shows up in a nasty dress, and it's your turn now to stand where I stand. Everybody looking at you. Here, take hold of my hand. Yeah, I can hear them, but what if I'm a mermaid in these jeans of yours with her name still on it? Hey, but I don't care, 'cause sometimes I said sometimes I hear my voice, I hear my voice, I hear my voice, and it's been here, silent all these years. I've been here, silent all these years.
I've always been drawn to unconventional endings, and writer Virginia Woolf's endings are no exception. One of her most salient endings is found in To the Lighthouse, which we heard a bit earlier in this service. Yes, Lily Briscoe has had her vision and has worked through her discomfort to finish the work she started 10 years earlier. However, we still get the sense that Lily's own life's work, in that moment of silent revelation, has only just begun. Perhaps the fact that this work is always unfinished, is what brings me satisfaction. Although Virginia Woolf's endings don't always give me the automatic warm fuzzies, whether I'm sitting there stumped or crying or smiling, often all at once, there is something at play that leaves me in awe, that leaves me feeling as if I had the intense religious experience of being ministered to by one of literature's great self-proclaimed atheists. However, not everyone feels that way about these endings. One of my peers expressed concern over whether Woolf might have an ethical responsibility to give us better tools to help us hold and resolve the discomfort she places us in. That also got me thinking, what is it that I find so compelling in an ending that forces me to keep doing the difficult work of unpacking it afterwards? Especially if the creator isn't giving us explicit tools to work through the possible pain of it all. One of my favorite podcasts these days is Poetry Unbound. In a recent episode, Irish poet and host Padraig O'Tuma said poetry, for him, is not an escape from the world, but an embracing of it. When I heard that, I thought immediately of my experience with these endings. When I read Virginia Woolf or listen to Simon and Garfunkel's Sound of Silence, these narratives transport me to the beauty and the pain found in life. They let the true, the real linger for me to silently sit with myself with the visions planted in my brain. For me, Woolf's writing is not an escape from the world, but an embracing of it. And even though the message is sometimes hard to bear, when presented through the beauty of the given art form, it makes reality a bit easier to receive. For Woolf, the act of reading lets us sit with unsettling endings. And equally for her, writing is a creative endeavor that provides a means to experience grief in its fullness. Earlier this month, I was able to put my grief over the loss of my grandfather into form for the first time. Although he died 17 years ago, it was a death I largely mourned alone in my dorm room. Knowing that Woolf used writing to the Lighthouse and the character of Mrs. Ramsay as a means of exploring and deliberately working through the loss of her own mother helped prime me to explore my own feelings surrounding my abuelo's death. It's as if Woolf's process gave me permission to engage my stifled, suppressed grief. Around that time, I was trying to finish up writing about my grandfather and moving on to something else. The news of the federal execution of Brandon Bernard hit me, really, like a wave of grief. It took me further back to my childhood stance against the death penalty, and it took me to questions of endings, of Bernard's death, of this administration's, of the victim's mother's pain, and of Woolf's directive in her works, most sharply in her endings, of the responsibility we have. A responsibility to sit with and work through the unsettling, uncomfortable realities of life. As the wave of grief flooded through me and I tried to get my mind back on my final papers, the killing of Brandon Bernard, the unprecedented pressing on of the Trump administration, the unhealed anger and pain of one of the victim's mothers continued to flood my heart, as it should. Reverend Michael Crumpler of the UUA reminds us that Bernard's was yet another Black murder in America, along with the mounting deaths from COVID-19. And now, the follow-up question stirring in my heart is, so what are we going to do about it? I don't have the answer for you on that, not just yet. I only have questions. In my own life, I often only made changes and used the tools at my disposal when I felt the weight of reality pressing upon me, when I leaned into grief. If we can't allow ourselves space to name our griefs as well as our joys, then what kind of stories are we really telling with our lives? What kind of histories will we leave for those who come after us, trying to make sense of a world they can only read about? If we can't show them that our lives were messy, complicated, imperfect, and we worked through them anyway, we are simply perpetuating some standard of outward perfection and inculcating inward shame. Yet very few spaces let us experience this. Perhaps this is why we gravitate to communities like this one, to spaces like these. At the end of this semester, my Introduction to Ministry Studies professor, Reverend Dr. Matt Potts, implicitly challenged and empowered us to lean into the grief around us, as the world needs people who are willing to turn towards suffering or grief. And as a friend of mine in divinity school, Lori Stevens, reminded me, sometimes all we can do for one another is sit with someone in their grief. These days, more often, via Zoom or the telephone. Virginia Woolf and the work of creative souls like her ministers to us by reconnecting us to the realness of life, challenging us to take the risk and sit in the painful truth of what's not working in the end, and sit with it long enough so that you know, in your bones, you have no choice but to face it.
Nada te turbe, nada te spanta. quien a Dios tiene, nada le falta, nada te turbe, nada te espante, solo Dios basta. Nothing can trouble, nothing can frighten those that seek redemption. Nothing can trouble, nothing can frighten God alone basta.
After, by Max A. Coots. After the words, a quiet. After the songs, a silence. After the crowd, only the memory recalls the gathering. Peace and justice have need of you after the words, the music, and the gathering. God grant you the depth for dedication to justice. God grant you the will to be an apostle of peace. Amen.